G'day, May 40 here. So if some homeless guy just starts ranting at me as I go by because I'm wearing a yarmulke and maybe my seat, my fringes are out, right? In my experience, right, just sharing my anecdotal experience, the odds are 10 to 1 that that person will be black. If I'm riding public transport, if I'm riding on a train or I'm riding on a bus, and the person next to me just starts ranting about Jews and how evil they are, because I'm wearing a yarmulke, I've got my seat out, right? In my experience, 10 to 1, that person will be black. And so if you were to pick two groups in the United States that have the least to do with each other, who are the least likely to work around each other, who are the least likely to live next to each other, it would be Ashkenazi Jews and African Americans. And I notice in reaction to Joe Biden's disastrous debate, right, you hear now Joe Biden say he's running against the elite. Well, the elite are about 50% Jews, right? The donor class, right, that's about 75% Jews, right? Jews donate about 75% of the funds the Democratic Party receives and about 30% of the funds that Republicans receive. Elite Jews in the media, right? About 50% of them are Jews. So Jews are leading the way, asking Joe Biden to step down, and African Americans are leading the way, supporting Joe Biden. So look at it as Jews versus blacks, look at it as, what, elites versus the grassroots, right? It's overwhelmingly a Jewish versus black, elite versus grassroots issue, right? The more informed the voter, the higher the IQ, the voter, the more successful the voter, the more affluent the voter, the more prestigious the voter, right, the more likely he wants Joe Biden to step down. On the other hand, the lower the IQ the voter, the least prestigious the voter making the least amount of money, right, then the least successful voter, the one who pays the least attention to what's going on in politics, then that person's going to much more likely support Joe Biden staying in. All right. Let's get a few clips here from mainstream media, see what people are saying about the Joe Biden story. Go to Fox News.
Okay after that fall he had on the bike yesterday.
Okay, all right, there he is. Okay.
11.
Not unusual.
Using note cards.
What?
Anyway.
Okay, this is Laura Ingram's show. She's picked up a lot of good clips. Man, these clips. Whoops. Okay, here we go. Finally got it queued up. Thank you, Laura.
Pretending to be shocked at Biden's mental lapses.
I think he's a great man, but I think the truth is he's not the answer.
If in fact they are confident, if they're saying no, there is nothing wrong, there is no actual cognitive decline, then show us that. That's what the American people want to see.
The Democratic elites are mostly late to acknowledge these age and ability issues compared to the rest of the public. The elites have been forced to reckon with it after the debate just 11 days ago to acknowledge.
And hold on, kids. This is what Joe regularly sounded like 3 years ago.
We have to make sure that women have the chance to succeed and thrive throughout their careers. The best way to get something done, if it holds near and dear to you that you like to be able to, anyway, we're going to get a lot done.
Why didn't a single reporter at that presser ask Biden what just happened there? Why did they all dismiss concerns that a man who had been in Washington for 5 decades had to use note cards for even the most basic policy questions?
The president, then, you see on his note card here, has his answer. This was very important to him.
Using note cards is certainly not out of the ordinary in politics. Does it signal cognitive decline?
I don't think it signals cognitive decline. And frankly, people who are many decades younger even often use note cards.
It is not unusual for White Houses or city halls or gubernatorial offices to try to get a sense of what reporters might be asking. Look, we saw Donald Trump with his hand-scrawled note cards. You know, there were images of that constantly when he would be at events.
Oh, Maggie. And while most Americans were stunned to watch Biden's meeting in Rehoboth with the pavement, not the Biden enablers.
You know, Joe Biden falls off his bike. Breaking news at 11.
At least my guy can get on a bike and doesn't have to take a golf cart around a world summit.
And you saw the president take a few hops up and down to try to show that he was agile and feeling okay after that fall he had on the bike yesterday.
Okay, all right, there he is. Okay, a very athletic President Biden.
I'd forgotten that one. And of course, America was supposed to believe that it was perfectly normal for a grown man to get confused about how to exit a stage and then on that same stage to shake hands with an imaginary person or even wander off in diplomatic settings.
A lot of fake or cheap fakes as we look at some of these falsely edited clips that the Trump campaign have been putting on to put him in the worst possible light.
Cheap fakes are a little bit simpler. They're cheap. They're just distorted, out of context videos, chopped up in certain ways, constructed in certain ways. That's what we're seeing. That's what the Biden administration, the Biden campaign is so worried about.
Cheap fakes. Was the whole debate a cheap fake, Brian? Of course, Biden's former press secretary has known the truth about him from day one, and she's never stopped running interference for him.
Inaccurate, false reporting that suggested that President Biden was kind of stalling, where he was paused, he was looking the other way. I feel like there's a double standard.
Yeah, there obviously is. They can't mess with him on substance, so they go after what they see as his Achilles heel, which is his age. A lot of people see his age as something that helps to explain some of his wisdom and some of his compassion.
It's his wisdom. Molly Hemingway, editor-in-chief of The Federalist, Charlie Hurt, opinion editor of The Washington Times. Both are Fox News contributors. All right, Molly, they're pretending to be surprised now that it's hurting them politically.
Yeah, and it's not just that they covered for him during the many years that we saw what we're seeing right now. They said that it was misinformation and disinformation, that people who noticed President Biden's problems with mental acuity should be censored, that social media platforms should take what they were talking about off of social media
they went
platforms.
after us.
And the only reason why they have changed posture now, it's the same reason why they covered up for him initially. They covered up for him initially because they thought it would be bad for the Democrat Party if you talked about these things. And now they're paying a lot of attention to it because they have lost confidence in Joe Biden's ability to win. And so they are trying to replace him for the same reason why they covered it up initially.
I mean, Charlie, I don't know how many times you and Molly and I over the last 4 years have done these types of segments. I mean, this is nothing. I went back and looked at stuff 3 and 4 years ago, and it was COVID, he stays in the basement. Oh, anyone can fall off a bike. Oh, we all use note cards. And I don't know if the press has much credibility at all, but I don't think they have a shred of credibility after this.
I pray they don't, but I've predicted that they lost all their credibility before, and then been disappointed to find out that that there's still people out there that believe it. Look, you know, so much ink has been spilled on how terrible Joe Biden was during the debate. Something that doesn't get said enough is how brilliant Donald Trump and his campaign were to do the debate and to agree to all of the terms that the Biden campaign laid out, and to do it on CNN with the most hostile moderators possible, and to do it in front of an audience. This was not a Fox audience, which, as you point out, and Molly points out, we've been talking about this for years. It's been obvious to our viewers for years. But by doing it on CNN in front of 50 million people who are not just Fox News viewers, he displayed for the world just how terrible, terrible shape the president is in, and it's left the media in this ridiculous situation where they've been trying to protect him all this time and have been protecting him all this time. Suddenly, even they can't deny it any longer, and obviously can't protect him, can't cover up for it anymore.
Yeah,
And perhaps the most important question here is, what other things are they covering up? What other things have they been lying about?
Obama's, Molly. Let's talk about what's going on in Obama world, because David Axelrod has come out, Paul Begala, Clinton, but he seemed very comfortable with where Biden was today. And now George Stephanopoulos.
So the Obama world always had contempt for Joe Biden. It reminds me of John F. Kennedy's team. They always had contempt for Lyndon Baines Johnson. And then once Lyndon Baines Johnson took power as president of the United States, everything just changed about him. His body language changed, his assurance returned.
Has come out and said he does not see Joe Biden, this was after his interview, 22 minutes, can serve out a second term. just late today.
If you ever heard bad things about the Biden team, it usually was coming from Obama world. And I do think that has kind of broken open.
Why did they hate him so much? Or just disrespected him? They didn't like him. They never did.
I don't know, but I mean, they are partly responsible for putting him in office, so I don't think they get any, Everyone here is responsible. They were all part of this conspiracy. Everyone in America was joking about this situation with President Biden back in 2020 when President Obama basically chose him to be the...
Right, she's absolutely right. And liberals were saying for years that the biggest difference in the right-wing news media versus the left-wing news media was over his coverage of Joe Biden's age. For conservatives, it was obvious that he was senile. I know we're not supposed to use the word senile. That immediately marks you as a bad person. We're supposed to talk about his decline in mental acuity. Well, senile just kind of cuts to the chase a lot more quickly. But this was the biggest difference between right-wing and conventional news media for the past 5 years. And the conservatives were right, and the liberals were clearly wrong.
The nominee, and he was foisted on the American people. But everybody is still lying. I mean, the Biden presidency is in many ways just a continuation of the Obama presidency.
But worse.
And the media and other Democrat Party elites are not really covering the real issue there, which is Joe Biden's not popular, not because of his age or his mental acuity,
or the debate,
but because of his policies and what he has done to the country. And so I don't see the media covering those issues. Before the debate, Joe Biden had favorability in the 30 percentile.
They were, he did the debate because he was losing.
Right.
And now
so
he's losing by more.
They're still not covering the story that is actually
late today, Charlie, Tester from Montana, Sherrod Brown from Ohio, Michael Bennett from Colorado were all quoted, again, it's all conveniently coming out, that they don't see Biden winning, that they think this is going to be Trump's election. What of that?
Yeah, suddenly, these people are playing with other people's money. When John Tester looks around and sees this polling and sees what it's going to do to him, it's one thing for the president to lose the White House, but you're talking about the Senate, Democrats losing the Senate. You're talking about them losing enough seats in the House to give a huge majority to Republicans, so that when Donald Trump takes office, he has major, strong majorities in both chambers. This could be absolutely devastating for Democrats, and nobody deserves more blame than Barack Obama. If Barack Obama had never never dragged Joe Biden out of the dustbin of forgetting him forever and made...
So I'd love to get Elliott Blatt back on the show, because when particularly conservatives talk about why was there's such an organized cover-up by our elites, particularly our elites in the media, why did the Biden aides cover up his precipitous mental decline? And the most common answer you get is, well, Biden's aides simply did the best they could with the hand they were dealt. And that's why you should stay out of dicey situations, right? That's why you should keep dangerous people, destructive people, disruptive people at arm's length. So when some angry, usually very black man starts screaming at me about Jews, all right, it's never someone who looks like Barack Obama. It's never a light-skinned black man. It's some dark-skinned black man in the full throes of often some psychotic episode, and they just start going off at me about the Rothschilds and all sorts of other Jewish conspiracies, and they're just screaming and screaming. The more distance that I can create with that person, usually the better. About 5% of the population are effectively psychopaths who you really want to minimize time with. But anyway, you get stuck in a situation such as you're a Biden aide and you're effectively being asked to lie to the American public about something that's of vital national security. And so what do? The easiest thing to do is simply to avoid those situations, right? Once you start getting compromised, right? Once you start sleeping with crazy, once you start befriending destructive people just because they're so entertaining, right? You are inviting all sorts of chaos and wreckage into your life. And if you get a job, right, you usually don't know what the real score is at your job until you join, right? It's not usually in the welcome packet. And then you might find out there's all sorts of illegal or unethical behavior going on in your workplace. And the best thing to do to protect yourself is simply to get out of there, right? You can't manage your situation usually in an unethical workplace. If you possibly can, get the heck out. So Absolutely. The Biden aides did the best they could with the hand they were dealt. And so have all other horrible people in history. All right. Joseph Stalin did the best he could with the hand he was dealt. Chairman Mao did the best he could with the hand he was dealt. Fidel Castro did the best he could with the hand he was dealt. Richard Nixon did the best he could with the hand he was dealt. All the horrible people in who were exposed, rightfully exposed in Me Too. So I'm not talking the marginal characters. I'm not talking the innocently accused people, but the really horrible people, right? They were doing the best they could with the hand they were dealt, right? Everyone does the best they can with the hand they were dealt. That's no excuse. If you find yourself in a bad situation where you're perpetrating some scam, right, the best thing to do is just get the heck out of there. Just leave.
Made him as vice president, we wouldn't be going through this nightmare now. So I love it that,
Yeah, a lot of people to
Barack
blame.
Obama gets all snitty about all this stuff, but it's all his fault.
Yeah, he created the new and re-energized Joe Biden. Molly and Charlie, wonderful to see you both. All right, coming up, we have some devastating polling news came out late.
Yeah, so Donald Trump is definitely moving ahead in the polls. We'll keep an eye on that. But here's the main story, right? And it's not something that's going to get covered much in the mainstream news media. So low-hanging fruit that I want to talk about, and that's the significant difference in attitudes towards whether or not Joe Biden should resign between the elites and the grassroots, between the well-informed and those with very little information, between the successful and those who aren't so successful, between Jews and between blacks. And this is Megyn Kelly. Megyn Kelly does a lot of great shows.
About the need for a new candidate before
she's talking to John Ellis.
Time runs out for other candidates to make their case to the party's convention delegates. It says a whisper campaign is inadequate to the moment.
Well, I mean, the time is running down, right? And all of this depends upon Biden agreeing to step down. So the question is, how much pressure can be brought to bear on him? And even if, the maximum amount of pressure is brought to bear on him, will he, in fact, step aside? It doesn't seem to me at all clear. I might be wrong about this, but...
Right. John Ellis used to run the decision desk at Fox News. He called the 2000 election for George W. Bush.
It doesn't seem to me at all clear that he is going to step aside, that he's just going to run out the clock, and he's the Democratic nominee, and that's that.
And I also believe he is a Democrat.
One of the reasons that the editorial writers are as panicked as they sound is, so far, Biden has been successful running down the clock.
Mm-hmm. And how long do you think they do have? I mean, the Democratic convention is in August, but the actual nomination will take place much earlier than the actual convention. I think it happens at the first week of August because they're going to do it online and via Zoom. So there's really only a couple of weeks in my estimation of how they could or when they could sub him out.
Yeah, there's a little quirk, which is that the Democratic convention is too late to meet the legal.
So you get quite a lot of under news on the Megyn Kelly show, right? Not just the conventional news, but the stuff that's underneath the news that the mainstream media don't tell you.
Requirements for being on the ballot in Ohio. So what the Democratic National Committee has proposed, meaning the White House has proposed, is that they move the nomination vote up to early August in order to qualify for the ballot in Ohio. That fits, as it happens, that fits their current plan almost perfectly. And you have, obviously, you have the Republican National Convention next week, and then you have the Olympics. So there are two major events that help Biden run down the clock. Mm-hmm. And that appears to be their strategy.
And so how does Megyn do so many great shows, right? She works hard, she's brave, and she has people working for her who work hard, and she has a background in journalism, and she uses all her skills, and I'm sure she's burning for redemption after having been forced out of NBC News in a humiliating exit.
It's for you and I, it's absolutely incredible.
And she's got a lot of money, right? She made a lot of money, even though NBC News forced her out.
That this is what they're going to do, but apparently this is what they're going to do.
Meanwhile, you have top Democratic operatives like James Carville, who for a while now has been calling for Joe Biden to not run for a second term, predicting as follows. He had a piece out yesterday, an op-ed saying exactly this, and then he went on television and doubled down. SOT 6.
He's going to come to the conclusion that this is just not a good idea. And he's going to resist it. And he's going to listen to his family. He's already it's all the same. We blame the staff, then we blame the media, then it's the elites in the Democratic Party. Do I look elite? What the hell's elite about growing up in rural South Louisiana and going to LSU?
Okay, so elite is the polite term for Jews.
And this is all across the country. And I understand it's all predictable, and he's got to go through this, and he'll get there sooner as opposed to later.
Sooner opposed to later. Where's your confidence come from?
Chris, I don't predict things. I'm just telling you it's inevitable. He will come to the conclusion. People will get the message to him. He will understand. His family will understand.
Do you agree with that, John?
I do, except I'm not sure I'm right.
Yeah, so I noticed the political prognosticators and the most clued-in political journalists have done a 180 this week and said now that they're overwhelmingly convinced that Joe Biden is going to stay in. So I'm not tapped into the same sources as the country's leading political journalists. So I'm just looking at the situation. So I am extrapolating from the John M. Doris book on moral character, where he said that the situation will frequently be the biggest determinant of how you behave. And I'm extrapolating from his book on moral character and the importance of situation and transmuting it into this political question and this, I think, common sense perspective that which cannot continue will stop. And it cannot continue that Joe Biden is president of the United States. He's just cognitively, clearly not up to the job. He is senile. He is considerably impaired. The country cannot allow it. And so what the exact mechanisms are that will force him out, I'm not exactly sure. But it just simply cannot continue. It's too ridiculous and too dangerous.
It seems to me that that in order to get Biden out, you need the core constituencies of the Democratic Party to tell him to get out, right? And the core constituency, the most important constituency of the Democratic Party, are Black Americans.
Okay, the core constituency as far as voting, all right? They are the lowest information voters, all right? So they're not subscribing to the New York Times. They're not generally sitting around analyzing the finer points of Biden versus Trump. Because they're such low information voters, they don't change much, right? They're predictable. They do what they were raised to do. They're not investigating new perspectives on politics. So they are a block. They are a reliable block of voters that the Democrats can count on. Now, on the other hand, right, there is a reliable block of donors, and that's overwhelmingly Jewish. And there's a dominantly left-wing intelligentsia, which is disproportionately Jewish.
Are the very core of the Democratic Party. They're the most reliable constituency. And, if you had to look at one person, probably be Representative Jim Clyburn as to how the Black community, Black voters are looking at Biden. It initially appeared that Clyburn was, edging Biden off the stage. I'm not so sure that's where he is right now. Other members of Congress, Black members of Congress, have been very supportive of Biden so far. But in 1974, Senator Barry Goldwater, Senator Hugh Scott, and Representative Jim Rhodes went to Richard Nixon and said, "You've lost the support of the party. You have to resign." And Nixon resigned. And that moment has to happen on the Democratic side in the next month. And Clyburn clearly would be one person who could make the march up to the White House. Schumer, Jeffries, I guess, would be the other two, but I'm not at all certain that Biden would listen.
The op-ed that Carville put out mentioned Clyburn, and what he said was, look, Clyburn spoke with New York Times opinion columnist Ezra Klein about a possible Democratic mini primary.
So no, Michael Kinsley is not dead. He's still very much alive. He's 73 years of age.
And Carville says, I want to build on that. This is Carville. I want to see the Democratic Party hold 4 historic town halls between now and the Democratic National Convention in August. One in the South, the Northeast, the Midwest, and the West. We can recruit the 2 most obvious and qualified people in the world to facilitate substantive discussions, Barack Obama and Bill Clinton. Think the Super Bowl with Taylor Swift in the stands. The young, the old, and everyone in between will tune in to see history being made in real time. I would advise Presidents 42 and 44 to select 8 leading contenders out of the pool of those who choose to run, with Kamala Harris most definitely getting a well-earned invite. To me, this reads like a Democratic pipe dream. Because as you pointed out 30 seconds ago, none of this can happen unless Joe Biden walks off stage left. And all of his messaging publicly, there's been some reports that behind the scenes, he says he understands he's only got a few days to prove his vigor to keep his role in this.
Right. You know who's the gatekeeper to Joe Biden now? Right. It's his crack addict son, Hunter. Right. Hunter is now the gatekeeper to the president of the United States. Right. There's deepening fissions between Joe Biden's staff and Joe Biden's family.
Race, but every message publicly has been, I'm not going anywhere. So what do you make of this plan that Carville outlines that, he correctly intimates Clyburn expressed an open mind to at least a few days ago?
I mean, I think it's a great plan. It would be fantastic television. It would be great for the Megyn Kelly show because you could talk about it, after each, I guess you would call it debate or forum. And I think it would actually be a very good way to find a new nominee. The problem, obviously, is that Biden may not buy in. Biden is the nominee unless all of the delegates decide not to go with him, and there's no indication that that's the case. So, it's a wonderful plan, and it gets right back to where we always are in this thing, which is unless Biden agrees to it, it's not going to happen. The weirdest thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
The weirdest thing about all this is we talk about it in terms of political tactics.
Look, I've said controversial things all my life, and when wise people want me to shut up, they quickly figure out what are my most vulnerable points, what are my most valuable connections. So for years, when people wanted to hurt me or to restrain me, they would turn to Dennis Prager and say, "Oh, Dennis, did you know that Luke Ford is saying this or doing this?" Because I had such veneration for Dennis Prager. Everybody has friends or people that they don't want to disappoint. So Joe Biden is not going to make this decision all on his own, right? If the people to whom Joe Biden feels most vulnerable, right, say you need to step out of the race, then that's when Joe Biden will step out of the race, right? We all have people that we care about intensely, right? That's where we get our meaning in life, and that's where we get our weakness.
Some political strategy. But what we saw in the debate 10 days ago or 12 days ago was a man incapable of, stringing a sentence together, lost the way he walked. I mean, it was unbelievable that that person could A, run for president again, and B, actually be president. And the discussion about these tactics and strategy and so on and so forth sort of obscure the basic question, which is there anyone in the world who thinks that Joe Biden can serve effectively as president in the calendar years 2025, 26, 27, and 28? And I believe the answer to that question is no. There is not a single person in the world who believes that. So the notion that he is going to run for president and he's going to stand up to the elites and he's going to show the press that he's the comeback kid and all this stuff, it doesn't address the fundamental question. And given how dangerous the world is at the moment, and as it always is, the question, it seems to me, would be, shouldn't Joe Biden resign the presidency? Yes. Yes. That party, I really don't get it. And there are a couple of Ed Luce from the FT and a few others have raised this, but I'm really surprised that, the basic thrust of all the commentary is, look, he shouldn't seek re-election, but it's fine that he serves out his term. And I don't know. I mean, Jeff Zients, his chief of staff, is a fantastic guy, and I'm sure is very competent, but we didn't elect Jeff Zients. We elected Biden.
Right. So Biden's press secretary, if someone can dig up that link for me, today in the press conference, she's asked, well, what if there's a nuclear attack on the United States? Is Joe Biden really up for it? And she says, well, he's got a formidable staff, right? He's got a competent staff. But only the president of the United States can make certain decisions. So see if you can find that KJP clip for me where she talks about, well, yeah, if there's a nuclear attack, Joe Biden's got a formidable staff. So perhaps the most famous statement by John Bowlby, right? He's the British psychiatrist who came up with attachment theory. And in his 1988 book, A Secure Base, he wrote that life is best organized as a series of daring ventures from a secure base. Right? Life is best organized as a series of daring ventures from a secure base. And when you don't have that secure base, you're not going to make daring ventures. My therapist said something very wise to me about 8 years ago. He said, do you think perhaps, or maybe 10 years ago, do you think perhaps your politics are so radical because your life is so passive, right? If you don't have a secure base, you're not going to feel strong enough to get out there and take risks. Why is the news media so dull these days? Because people in journalism and people in America in general don't have the secure base that we used to have, right? As America becomes more diverse, that means we have less in common with each other, means that our secure base is smaller and smaller, meaning so many people don't even have a secure base, and therefore they're going to be less and less likely to take daring adventures. Right? If you're not feeling safe, nothing good can develop. If you're dating a woman, all right, and she's not feeling safe with you, nothing good's going to develop. If you're thinking about starting a friendship with someone and you don't feel safe with that person, right? Nothing good is going to develop. Right? Life depends upon a secure base. And then from that secure base, you go out and you engage in daring ventures. But if you don't have a secure base, you're not going to feel strong enough to get out there and engage in daring ventures. And with the journalism business model basically broken in an increasingly diverse society, all right, being controversial is no longer considered a cool thing. In the 1960s into the 70s, being controversial was great. That was a compliment if you were controversial. But an increasingly dangerous, an increasingly crime-ridden, increasingly diverse country where we have less and less in common, where other people are increasingly strangers to us, where we have a harder time predicting what will be the results if we do anything edgy or risky or adventurous, right? People lead smaller and smaller lives. They stay home, right? They play video games. They watch TV, right? Their home is their secure base, and the world outside their home is incredibly challenging because it's so diverse, and there just aren't that many people who create a fellow safe space for them because you share common values or a common ethnicity or a common religion. And I think this is a major reason why the news media has become boring and why it's become so dangerous to be controversial, to say anything outside of the Overton window, because we live in an increasingly insecure society, right, where we can count less and less on our neighbors, right? Workers have fewer protections in the United States than anywhere else in the world. And as the people around us become increasingly unlike us, we're going to retreat from the world, and we're going to be less and less inclined to say anything risky, to do anything risky, to jump into great adventures.
Biden and Kamala Harris. So I don't know. It's so weird to read this stuff every day, which I do for the newsletter.
Yes, and you've done this for a career. So put it in perspective for us, John. Like, what a tsunami this is. I mean, you've been in this business a lot longer than I have, and I've just been stunned at the amount of blowback from the press that is there to support him. They shouldn't be, but that's what their mission is, to support him and support Democrats. But it's on now, and I think we both know why it's on. They genuinely think he's going to lose. It's not about it honoring their commitment to tell the truth. But just zooming out even from that point, put it in perspective, just the tsunami that he's facing and how extraordinary this is.
Well, I mean, it's in terms of the Biden administration. I wrote a column, a piece for my Substack newsletter in July of 2021, and the piece said that Biden is too old to seek re-election in 2024. If you look at a YouTube video of him in 2000.
Okay, here is the 27-second clip from the press conference
he's
today.
Sharpest before 8 p.m. Well, he also said he's sharpest before 8 p.m. So, say that the Pentagon at some point picks up an incoming nuke. It's 11 p.m. Who do you call? The First Lady?
He has a team that lets him know of any.
That's phenomenal.
He also said he's sharpest before 8 p.m. So, say that the Pentagon at some point picks up an incoming nuke. It's 11 p.m. Who do you call? The First Lady?
He has a team that lets him know of any news that is pertinent and important to the American people. He has someone that is decided, obviously, with his National Security Council on who gets to tell him that news.
Yeah, that's comforting. Don't you feel better?
2008, in the debate in 2012 with Paul Ryan, in the last days of the Obama administration, from 2008 to 2016, he sort of miraculously doesn't appear to age. He's sharp. He's verbose.
Right, because he had a major facelift just prior to becoming vice president.
As he always is, but
he's the first president to have a facelift, and somehow this never gets talked about.
He seemed fine. He certainly seemed all there. And looking at video of him in 2020 and 2021, it wasn't like I had deep sources somewhere that were telling me that Biden's mental capacity had declined. It was evident by watching YouTube. So I write this, and the other thing was in the summer, June and July, I started to talk to people, all of whom said, "Gee, I'm not sure Joe can go beyond one term." He's really showing his age.
And Joe Biden, right? She wants her own "Hail to the Chief" song. Right, she gets her own special music, right, because her husband's the president, and he gets "Hail to the Chief." Well, they've come up with a piece of music to play when Jill Biden enters the scene. I mean, she loves the trappings of power.
I write this, piece for this newsletter, and a lot of people attacked some of the readers of my newsletter attacked me for, I don't know, being anti-Biden or something. But it was evident to all of us in 2021. It was certainly evident to all of us in 2022 that Biden's mental acuity, which is apparently the phrase we use now, had declined and was visibly declining. And throughout that whole period, the press simply didn't cover it. It defies belief that all of those very smart, well-educated, experienced reporters covering the White House were surprised by Biden's mental decline in the last 90 days. It makes no sense. It's completely unbelievable. So they were complicit in keeping that story out of public discussion, and it blew up. That whole complicity became apparent during the debate, and now there's furious backtracking.
Okay, this is the Washington Examiner from 2022. Jill Biden has her own Hail to the Chief style entrance theme, courtesy of the Marine Corps band. Right, this is apparently important to her. Jill Biden has her own walk-up music now. The Marine Corps band was instructed last fall to come up with an entrance theme for the First Lady. The band now has in its repertoire an original composition titled Fanfare for the First Lady. It's essentially Jill Biden's personal Hail to the Chief. It is to be performed and repeated at official White House functions from her first appearance until she is ready to speak.
Biden has to resign. Biden is really old. Biden has lost it, so on and so forth. This is not a recent development.
I see it almost as a covenant between the media and the White House, where everyone knew about his decline. The media tacitly agreed not to cover it so long as the White House would not make fools of them, would keep him behind closed doors and shielded in a way that the big lie would not be exposed. And the White House fell down on the job. They agreed to this debate. They put him out there. He couldn't do it. And they no longer had any choice but to report on what we were all seeing. But really, that's secondary to their number one goal, which is to make sure a Democrat holds on to the White House. And once that was out in front of all of us, the panic set in that he could not do it. Now, everyone had seen what was suspected or actually seen behind the scenes. And they had only one mission and have to this moment only one mission, which is to win on November 5th. And if that requires knifing Biden now, then that's what that requires. I do want to show you something. We too took a look back early on at Biden over the years in much the same way you just outlined and you put in your piece in July of 2021. And it really is remarkable. I'll play it here and I'll tell the listening audience what dates we're talking about, but it's worthwhile to see it on YouTube for our YouTube audience after the fact. Watch.
The end result is they're about to knock my mother on the head with a lead pipe, shoot my sister, beat up my wife, take on my son.
Jack Kennedy lowered tax rates, increased growth. Ronald Reagan.
Now you're Jack Kennedy. In America, we never bow. We never bend. We endure. We move forward. We are America, and we are second to none.
Your party wants to go socialist
20.
medicine.
My party is
and
me.
Socialist
right
healthcare.
now, I am.
And they're going to dominate
party.
you, Joe. You know that.
I am the Democratic Party right now. Much more informed on
21.
The motives of some of the political players and some of the beer brewed here. It is used to make the brew beer. It is fine. Oh, Earth Rider, thanks for the Great Lakes. I wonder why it's there. Don't mess with the women in America unless you want to get the benefit.
It's right there in front of your very eyes, John.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't. I did no investigative reporting for the column. Let's put it that way.
So late night TV has turned dramatically. So a few months ago, Stephen Colbert and all the major late night TV hosts were mocking the media talking about Joe Biden's age, right? They thought it was a completely unworthy focus of attention. Stephen Colbert led the way in mocking that tiny segment of the news media that reported on Joe Biden's age and galloping senility. And I can't play the clips because I'll immediately get some copyright nonsense. But at least it's being covered now by Fox News.
And the other thing I think of is if we say that there are 45 people who are credited to be in the Brady room, which is the White House briefing room, and let's say that Megyn Kelly is one of them, and let's say that Megyn Kelly is thinking about doing a story about Biden's age, and let's say that one of the White House flacks says, Megyn, you can't do that, or we're going to do what? That's the part I don't get is there has to be one or two reporters in the room who's, when they're contacted by the White House or, hectored by the White House to say you can't say that about Joe Biden's age or whatever, it would seem to me that would sort of spur them to say it. So that's another piece I don't understand about
James Rosen asked a question directly of Joe Biden about his age and the opinion poll showing that the American public thinks he's too old, and he was banned from the White House briefing room for 8 months. Peter Baker of the New York Times, who's now reporting about the age issue post-debate, had a post talking about how the White House had been threatening, that they'd been calling. He had a mention about how the White House would call your editor if you asked questions about the about his age issues. And
Right.
Matt Taibbi, very respected journalist, now independent, wrote a piece saying complaining that they would contact your editor about an article you're writing is the equivalent of saying, where are my balls? Just saying, this is a badge of honor for most actual reporters to get, the source calling your boss and saying, please don't have her write that. Please don't have him write that. And one final point on the story, Cenk Uygur, liberal commentator, said he had interviewed Sam Donaldson about all his years covering the White House, storied ABC reporter. And he said his editor at ABC, every time that the editor got a call from the White House complaining about Sam Donaldson, would give Sam Donaldson a raise for doing his job. How times have changed.
One last thing about 2021. At the time that I wrote the piece, the data was that 60%, I believe it was, 60% of the electorate believed that Biden was too old to serve in a second term. And that number has gone up steadily to the point that AP and NORC, and this was last fall, their poll, and NORC is arguably the best polling organization in the world, their poll showed that 80%, 78% of registered voters believed that Biden was not capable of, quote, serving effectively as president in a second term. So it would seem to me that if 80% of the people in the United States of America think he's too old to seek re-election, that the press corps would be all over that story. And one of the great mysteries of, news items comes out to 6 days a week. Political items, it comes out 3 days a week or 4 days a week, depending. I read this stuff all day long. And when I read the NORC poll with the AP in the last fall, I thought, well, that's the dam breaking, right? 80%. This has got to be a huge story. And it wasn't. There was no follow-up. And the only follow-up actually was other polling organizations, sort of amazed that was the number that AP and NORC had pulled, started to ask the same questions. And of course, it confirmed everything that the AP and NORC found, although in some cases it was 65%, in other cases it was 70%, but generally speaking, 2/3 or more thought that Biden was incapable of serving effectively as president in a second term. How that's not a story for the front page of every major newspaper in the country, I have no idea.
Yeah, except you do know. So the latest Times Siena poll shows 75%, I think it was 74%, continue to have those concerns, greater in the Times poll at least than ever post-debate. But I wanted to pick up on something you said, because earlier, the Times now is all in on getting Biden out. They're not the only ones, almost all the press. But you point out something important about the black vote within the Democratic Party and looking at leaders like...
Right. They don't want to talk about how this is a dominantly Jewish versus black divide on whether or not Joe Biden should get out, right? The more informed the voter, the higher IQ the voter, the more successful the voter, the more affluent the voter, the more likely he is to want Joe Biden to drop out.
Clyburn, like Hakeem Jeffries. And they're going to be forced to make a decision here, right? It's sort of interesting to watch the Democratic Party being split between their core base of black voters and white elites. That really is their base now. The people who...
Their base is Jewish elites who donate most of the money to the Democratic Party.
Read the Times, the people who live, where I lived for 17 years on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, they're going to have to make a choice if things remain as they are with those two groups split over what to do. And what does history tell you will be the winning factor?
Well, I think, it really is the outcome on, if we can call it this, I'm not sure we can call it this, but if you say on the black side of the Democratic Party, the leadership, Clyburn, Jeffries.
So the Democratic Party is obviously the black party, right? Blacks have a stranglehold on the Democratic Party. And so Republicans should simply identify as the white party to give Americans a choice about, what kind of philosophy, what kind of ethos, what kind of community they want to establish.
Et al., if they come to the conclusion that Biden the Biden campaign can't continue and the Democratic Party needs to nominate someone else, their leadership will have, I think, a significant impact on what we might call the black electorate. On the other hand, if the black electorate says, no, you can't do that, I don't know that Clyburn and...
you'll have 100% of some urban precincts voting for the Democratic candidate. Blacks simply do not vary much in their political support.
And Jeffries have enough juice to say, we don't care what you think, we're just going to go ahead. So to me, that's the most interesting thing to watch in terms of what the various Democratic constituencies do.
And Biden has lost many Jewish intellectuals for his confused back and forth position on Israel versus Hamas and Gaza. So Fox News has thrown all in with Israel, and a number of Jews, seeing the woke left turning against them, are now coming over to the Republican side.
That constituency is by far the most important in my view. The elite constituency, which big money, college educated, New York Times readers, etc.
Yeah, Jews.
They've decided And Biden has turned that decision into a kind of faux populist campaign against elites, which to you and I seems preposterous, but that's the tactic. Again, what's missing from all this is he actually capable of serving as president now? It's not so much whether he can seek re-election, it's about whether he's capable of serving as president now. And until we get a medical examination that says yay or nay, which of course the White House is avoiding at all costs, it seems to me that's an open question. And since they are avoiding it at all costs, I think we have to assume that the news on Biden's mental capacity is probably not good.
Yeah, a man who admits now he only works between 11 and 4. He's a 6.
No. Between 10 a.m. and 4. All right, back to Jesse Waters.
Senators are looking at polling and having aneurysms. One lawmaker said if they stick with Biden, it could be a weekend at Bernie's situation. Now, when a dead man holds you hostage, it says more about the hostage than the dead man. Jason, we call him J-Cal, is a Silicon Valley tech entrepreneur and
Elliott
co-host
Blatt.
of the All In podcast.
How's it going, bro?
All right,
what's
you got a
going on,
prediction?
bro?
What
What's this
happens
urgent matter we need?
Thank you. Okay, so I often hear the Biden debate compared to Donald Trump's Access Hollywood tape. So when the Access Hollywood tape leaked, far more Republican politicians came out disendorsing Donald Trump and severing any connection they had to Donald Trump than have done so for Joe Biden. So do you see much of a parallel between Joe Biden's disastrous performance revealing his senility in the first debate and the Access Hollywood tape?
They seem to be different oranges and apples. I don't think they're directly comparable. I mean, Trump's revelations were maybe a bit embarrassing. Though I think it hurt a lot of women, or a lot of women were offended by this. Maybe these were crocodile tears, maybe they weren't, but a certain sort of stripe of feminist woman is going to be deeply offended by that. And what brought this home to me was back in 2020 when I was going to vote. There was this older woman standing outside the polling place, and she was basically screaming, remember, grab him by the pussy, She was really still upset about that, and that was her. I mean, Trump just ignites furious opposition,
Yeah.
And it sort of ties in, to use your, what's his name? The Stanford professor.
Ronnie Goldman.
Your Goldman.
My
analysis.
Goldman. Yes.
That, heroes. I mean, I really enjoyed that analysis. I think there's a lot of truth to it, but I think, so how about this? How much of the animus against Trump is policy driven, and how much is personality driven?
I would say it's 50%, maybe 50-50, 60-40. If anything, more personality than policy, but it wouldn't be any less than 40% policy.
Okay, so I think there's two camps that don't really overlap too much, and I think there's a camp that's the high IQ case against Trump would be policy driven.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of people with technical knowledge about government and international relations oppose Trump purely on policy grounds. And then the other other circle in the Venn diagram are just kind of crazed women and leftists. So anyway, to get to your original question, they're hard to compare. I'm sure there's a comparison.
Okay, so let's go through the transcript. So this is Donald Trump saying, I moved on her. She was down on Palm Beach. I moved on her and I failed. I'll admit it. I did try and fuck her. She was married. So not a very moral, upstanding thing to do, not sentiments that typically a politician would want broadcast, but very common sentiments for someone in Donald Trump's position, right? Most married men are not cheating, not because they are so righteous, but because they simply don't have the opportunities that people like Donald Trump has. So for people in Trump's position, I would say that his sentiment was pretty much par for the course. What do you think?
Yeah, so there's a lot of moralizing done by people who would never even have the opportunity, right? So it's very easy for them to sort of turn their nose up at Trump's behavior. So that type of shock and outrage needs to be discounted. But what is puzzling to me is how Trump can retain Christian support.
Yeah, there's a very good analysis of it. I'll try to find it and share it with you. But essentially, evangelical Christians recognize that sexual temptation is ubiquitous among men, but particularly intense for men who have access to beautiful women. And so they don't hold it against Trump that he's tempted and that he's fallen in this area, because they consider it just one part of being a strong man. And so just like heroes in the Bible who committed sexual sins like King David and other characters, so too Donald Trump is a mighty warrior on their side. But one trait that comes with being a mighty warrior is being a coxman.
Yeah. That's funny. I mean, but even apart from the sexual behavior, there just the sort of the coarseness of the language and the kind of blunt combativeness that just, he doesn't resonate like Christians I knew growing up. You know, he seems so out of step with it. He's such a New Yorker, which I don't mind, but I just find, I find how he can thread that needle is amazing. I mean, he walks.
Well,
on
it's
water.
the situation, right? Evangelical Christians have had 50 years of Republicans saying we're on your side and not getting anything done. And then Donald Trump runs for office and he says, if you elect me, you will have power. And they've believed him because he has delivered, right? He got 3 conservatives on the Supreme Court. They overturned Roe v. Wade. So he's consistently delivered. So I think it's the extremity of the situation where Christians find themselves increasingly on the defensive in America. And all the people who said the Christian things, wanting their support for the last 50 years, didn't deliver. And so finally, here was a guy who delivered.
Yeah, and that will be Trump's legacy. I mean, the decisions that have come from that court since those justices were appointed have been pretty important decisions that are going to they're going to have real lasting impact. It seems like all elections are really a battle for the court. If you want to talk about everything else is just, it's just textbook policy, Kennedy School of Government, whatever. Just the government runs like a machine, the Tom Wolfe quote.
It's just a train going down a track and people on the left and right cry and scream, but the train's going to keep going down the track.
Yeah. So, and, the elephant in the room is the abortion question. And that, will define, that's what drives the animus. That's what drives, if you think about it, that's really what drives the women's vote against him. And so.
Okay, I've got more here from this transcript. I want to go deeper.
Go
so Trump says, I better use some Tic Tacs. I'm automatically attracted to beautiful women. I just start kissing them. It's like a magnet. Just kiss. I don't even wait. And when you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything. Whatever you want. Yeah, grab them by the pussy. You can do anything. And so when a woman is attracted to you, usually when I've moved in for a kiss, and sometimes it's been in a relatively short period of time that I've known the woman, if she is attracted to me, then it works. You can. If there's magnetism between you, just move in. And then as far as grabbing them by the pussy, all right, Trump is talking about women who are sexually attracted to him. So I can think of at least 2 occasions where I was lying in bed with a woman and we hadn't done anything physically. We were just lying on top of the bed, talking. So we hadn't held hands. We hadn't kissed. We hadn't done anything physical. And I won't say grab her by the pussy, but I went for her pussy. That was my first physical move because I just wanted to kick things off like a rocket. And so
you felt like stampeding, bro.
Yeah. So normally I would, go through the stages and be a perfect Victorian gentleman, but sometimes I just wanted to kick things off, and it worked because the woman wouldn't be lying on a bed with me if she wasn't attracted to me. And so if the man doesn't make the first move, right, women aren't usually going to initiate, right? 19 times out of 20, a man has to initiate sex. And so I initiated. I read them correctly. There were women who wanted to have sex with me, and we got into ongoing intimate relationships. But I kicked it off by grabbing them by the pussy, and they were excited to be with me, and we had magnetic, powerful sex. And this is appropriate if both people want to be with each other. Donald Trump is not talking about walking down the street and grabbing strangers by the pussy. Any thoughts?
Yeah. You're right. In both cases, you were both picking up on certain signals that were pretty, obvious. But so, yes, and the onus is on men to take the initiative. But I agree with everything you said. There's nothing more to add.
But this is called sexual assault. But this is routinely in middle of the road publications described as sexual assault, and that's not at all what Donald Trump was talking about.
You know what the difference is? It's the status of the men taking the initiative. So if a low status man were to do that, that would be sexual assault.
Well, whether it's welcomed or not, right? An unwelcome kiss, I can understand why that would be considered assault, right? If a man kissed me, I would consider it assault.
Yes. You're not down for the old Pete Buttigieg, Buttigieg, whatever you pronounce his name. But what about the analysis? It's like another topic of yours is status, right?
Yeah.
The higher your status, the bigger pass you get. Right?
In some circumstances, like if the woman doesn't welcome it and you're high status, she has more of a payoff perhaps for lodging a complaint against you.
Even if she does welcome it, she may find that it's in her best interest to pretend that she didn't welcome it.
Right.
There's financial advantage to be acquired.
It's very hard to have promiscuous sex without getting into trouble, right? There was probably a brief period in the 1970s, maybe into the 1980s, where you could have promiscuous sex, but particularly these days, it's a minefield.
Well, yeah, but in my experience, once that door is open, it's sort of like demons are let out of hell.
Yeah.
Your life suddenly just becomes magically far more complicated than it was before, and little things start to go wrong. Big things start to go wrong. Cars start to break down. Tires, get flat. It's like the universe is telling you, there's something wrong here. And, that energy needs to be contained and used responsibly.
Yeah.
Does that make any sense? I don't know. It seems there's a psychic dimension to this. Anyway.
But some people clearly seem to be able to get away with it. So Jack Nicholson, Warren Beatty, all right, incredibly promiscuous men. Wilt Chamberlain said he slept with over 10,000 women in his life. So some people, President John F. Kennedy slept with hundreds and hundreds of women. All right, some people seem to be able to manage it, but it does exact a psychic toll that not everyone's going to be suited for. Not everyone's going to be able to pay the toll.
Exactly. Everything has its price, and sometimes the price isn't
too much.
Well, it's not written on the label either. You don't know.
Yeah.
There's like other bills that come due later that weren't advertised, and then suddenly you get this bill, quote unquote, and you said, oh, then you think about it, you start to connect the dots. You're saying, oh yes, this is a bill. I went through that toll at that time, and now this bill's come due. So yeah.
I remember I slept with a woman who I didn't want to sleep with. I was not at all attracted to her, but she was giving me a massage, and then suddenly a woman I had no interest in, suddenly I went through with the deed, And then the next day she called me. She needed a ride to the hospital because she'd been in an auto accident. So there were complications that came with that unwanted sexual interaction.
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's the psychic stuff. That's like the strange events start materializing. Just strange. I know you're not prone to sort of metaphysical ideas, but it really feels like that sometimes. It would be hard to convince me otherwise. That certain just strange psychic forces suddenly, it's like an opening for them, and then they come pouring through. Anyway.
Okay, have you heard about the Hawk Tuah girl?
Only peripherally. In the little I knew, I didn't want to know anymore.
Okay, so she was drunk. She was outside a club, and she was interviewed by these two black guys who do a YouTube social media show, and they ask her, do you have one move in the bedroom that just drives men crazy? And she says, yeah. And she then right.
Yeah.
She says, you gotta spit on that thing. And so the ricochet effect of coughing up a loogie, right? Hawk Tuah. And this is what I would notice. Like I dated several porn stars, and they were very good at creating a lot of lubrication when they went down on me. And so this pretty 21-year-old girl named Haley Welch, right? She's become something of a sensation. And what's interesting is that she's immediately kind of embraced by conservatives. And so I think there is this reflex that if you just enjoy simple things without sophistication, without reflexivity, without discipline, but you just like the simple things in life, like a Big Mac, a blowjob, NASCAR, football, right? You're conservative because everyone wants to elevate themselves from everyone else. And so for people on the left, they elevate themselves by a more disciplined, a more elevated or more reflexive, just a different approach to life. So just enjoying simple pleasures like a Big Mac, NASCAR, a heterosexual blowjob, right? That is not considered status or cool or something that people on the left. So this is an article here in Slate, how the right won the Hawk Tuah girl, and this is a huge, huge problem for Democrats. And so they simply make the point that people who just unironically enjoy simple things in life are immediately codified by the right. The people just assume that if you are not reflexive, that if you're not delving into your motivations and disciplining your motivations, and you're just enjoying simple, primitive pleasures, that is right wing. And here's the conclusion, right? The Democrat experience should not be a gauntlet of soul-crushing fury and anxiety, right? The party must make room for people who enjoy life and all of its beautiful frivolities, which is the default setting all of humanity should be aspiring towards. So the default setting of humanity would be considered conservative, right? Just enjoying the beautiful frivolities of life. And you have to be educated to be on the left. Go ahead.
Yeah, we're all simple villagers. Ultimately, the conservatives' edge is that, humble, simple tastes, basic pleasures, fresh water, apple pie, Hawk Tuah, all these sort of conventional heterosexual things are celebrated and can be lionized on the right. But on the left, everything has to be deviant. You have to be, and they have contempt for normalcy, right? So it's to celebrate the fringes and elevate the fringes and, what is it? What is that quote? The beginning of all virtue is hatred of the middle class or something.
Yeah.
One of those French philosophers or something.
Yeah.
Yes. And so they're incredibly puritanical. The left is incredibly puritanical when it comes to the mores of, the right villager, right? And they're incredibly permissive when it comes to the deviants and the trannies and all of that stuff. So it's just bizarre. And so on one hand, you're talking about this, so they have this Puritan angle, and then they switch to their Al Goldstein all of a sudden when it comes to deviants.
Yeah. And do you know who the actress Sydney Sweeney is? She's got beautiful natural D-cup breasts.
I think I might have heard the name, but...
All right, she was on Saturday Night Live. She hosted Saturday Night Live about 4 months ago. And then following the episode, various social media users declared wokeness is dead. And one of Canada's biggest national newspapers asked, are Sydney Sweeney's breasts double D harbingers of the death of woke? And so the right immediately seized on this woman's beautiful, double D natural breasts. And here we've got the National Post from Canada. We spent years being chastised for desiring or admiring beauty because beauty is rare and exclusionary, and to exclude is to hate. Or so we've been scolded to accept by today's diversity, equity, and inclusion fanatics. We aren't supposed to admire Sydney Sweeney's beauty, but we've done it anyways. The times they are a-changing. And so her beautiful double D natural breasts, blonde chick with great natural tits, symbolize the death of woke. And I remember that just sweeping Twitter after her Sydney Sweeney's Saturday Night Live appearance. Any thoughts?
Well, it reminds me of the famous expression that red states have the best titty bars.
Right.
But yes, the left is generally the marginalized. They're generally off the sort of idealized norm, the double D blonde, the cheerleader. They're generally not these people. They're generally, you're generally the 5s and 6s and maybe the occasional 7, but they're not. And then, of course, 5 and below. There's a certain type of resentment that hot chicks engender, and so they hate that. When they see the power that hot chicks can command, over their attributes, this enkindles a lot of rage and resentment, as with those lesser endowed.
Right. It's another argument that life is not equal, and trying to create equality is frequently a pointless task.
Yeah. And so, they'll just call people's attraction to those things, lookism. They'll just invent what do you call it? They'll invent a new disease or new ideology that nobody was really knew existed, because people are just going with the grain of their own nature. They're not subscribing to a particular ideology. They're just reacting viscerally.
Right. It's the equivalent of, if you want to talk about Joe Biden and his mental decline, then you're indulging in ageism, right? Yes. Lookism, ageism, Islamophobia, ableism, just a bewildering.
Can you believe that word exists? Ableism?
No, I can't understand. I don't resonate with it at all.
I told you, I spent a year as a lefty when I was 19 or 20.
Yeah.
And I couldn't get over the vocabulary. Because I had just very fixed meanings about words, and the way they would just abuse words just kind of rubbed me the wrong way. It never allowed me to completely gel and be absorbed into that scene, as it were. And so I finally found myself on the way out. But without resentment, there'd be no left, right? The left just is fed. It's a fire fed by resentment, and it will always exist. And it just, sometimes it'll be contained, and other times it'll spill out and create a fire.
Okay, other topic that I wanted to hit with you. So there's a lot of concern that the Biden White House, in collusion with the media, has been covering up Joe Biden's obvious senility. And the response is that Biden's White House is simply doing the best they can with the hand that they were dealt. And my response to that is, everybody just does the best they can with the hand they were dealt. I mean, that's just how the world works. Eddie, Harvey Weinstein, Charles Manson, everyone just does the best they can with the hand that you're dealt. And what's important if you get yourself into a dishonorable situation is to get the hell out of the situation rather than trying to behave honorably in an impossibly fraudulent, dishonest situation. So I think most of us have had jobs where we suddenly realize that what's going on is not right. Or we've encountered people that we've allowed into our life and we find that they are really bad for us. And so I love this because it's the importance of story, the importance of situation, right? You need to be very careful about the situations that you choose to spend time in, because situations will have a profound effect on you. And there are all sorts of situations that a decent person wants to stay away from. But what do you think of that excuse that is offered up for how the Biden White House has been operating? They're just doing the best they can with a bad hand.
I think it's true. I think they're on a team, and you're either going to be loyal and do what needs doing, or you can resign.
Yeah.
Right. And there may even be a cost to resigning. You could be seen as disloyal. In certain tribal situations, if you, in Islam, if you leave Islam and you're apostate, you're marked out. You can be marked out for death.
Right.
Right. Loyalty is a very strong value. So, and it far surpasses the value of truth. So if you have to, like I'd mentioned before, like if you're one of these people that's saying sharp as attack, sharp as attack, sharp as attack, right? All of these media people, in the face of just direct evidence to the contrary, it's going to be very hard for you the rest of your career, because people can always point to that statement. It's immemorialized, I blew that word, on the internet. And now everyone has a legitimate right to doubt what you're saying, because you're saying something with the same amount of conviction and emphasis about something that was later proven to be false. So journalism has taken a big black eye here. So it's going to be interesting to see how well they recover. And chances are they'll just recover. They'll just keep going. And then everything falls into what I call the whatever bucket. Right? Because if you use this fact against them, they can just say whatever and move on.
Now, what do you go ahead.
The ability for people to move on and say whatever has to be, Mike, the one word that just infuriates me the most back when I was doing sort of Facebook tit for tat debates online with friends. I'd make a very valid point, and I think a solid refutation of an argument, and then I just get a one-word reply, whatever. End of conversation. That was highly infuriating to me. And so, will the media be able to just whatever this 6 months from now?
So something else I've noticed, have you had well, you don't wear a yarmulke, so you haven't had the experience, I assume, of black men just screaming at you like all sorts of anti-Jewish abuse, usually homeless, psychotic black men. So more than any other group, if someone's going to be screaming horrible things about Jews when I walk by, 9 times out of 10, it's a black man, a very dark-skinned black man. But you haven't had that experience?
Oh, not on that particular topic. Yeah. No, I've seen those sort of psychotic episodes that, black men often engage in.
But it seems to reflect a profound Jewish-black divide on Joe Biden. It seems like the higher the IQ, the more accomplished, the more affluent, the more successful, the more informed the Democrat, the more they want Joe Biden to resign. And those groups with the least information, the least IQ, the least wealth, those who spend the least time following the news are the most supportive of Joe Biden. It just seems to be a dramatic black-Jewish divide in the Democratic Party and in its reaction to Joe Biden's disastrous debate. Any thoughts?
Well, I'm always a little bit confused about how I wonder what I know of the blacks that do vote. They do vote basically 90+%
Yes.
for Democrats, right? But what percentage of that community actually votes? Like a lot of these,
yeah, not a huge amount, not nearly as much as Jews.
Yeah, and so they're killing. It just seems like Democrats, and even to a degree, Republicans, are sort of kill themselves to try to acquire, a bigger fraction of a demographic that doesn't really vote that much. It's not that consequential. Whereas, this is Ann Coulter's point, and Ann Coulter is sort of echoing Steve Saylor about why not just appeal to white people as white people and walk away with this thing.
Right, given that African Americans essentially have a stranglehold on the Democratic Party, why would the Republican Party then not identify as the white party?
Yeah, either explicitly or sort of implicitly. And this is seen as very distasteful among white
sophisticated people.
What was it, the Southern strategy advocated by, what was his name?
Richard Nixon.
But it was one of Nixon's advisors, Atwater.
Pat,
was it Buchanan?
Atwater, Pat Buchanan, maybe. Okay. I mean, Nixon ran on it in 1968.
Oh, he did.
Yeah.
So he explicitly appealed to white people as white people.
No, he didn't exclusively. No.
Explicitly.
No, he didn't explicitly, but he recognized that he could pick up southern states.
Yeah, and so when I had my debates with people on Facebook, this Southern strategy was pointed to as being the reason that these people were Democrats. They were very thoroughly and deeply offended by that. And I don't know, in retrospect, it might have been the right move.
Okay, anything going on with you? Any other points that you would like to bring up?
Oh, not particularly. I mean, you called me out on the stream,
Thanks.
So I figured I had to call in.
No, I appreciate it. I wanted to talk through those stories with you.
Yeah. I'm fascinated by this. I'm a little, I have a little trepidation about what's going to unfold in the next week or two. There's been a poll, sort of. I don't know, it was just with me, but I feel like there's just this strange background tension with this story, and it's sort of, maybe it's just my own paranoia, but this feels like a very big story now.
Yeah.
Biden collapse, and I was, it's very amused in the beginning, but now there's lots of actual concern in my consciousness. So it's fun to watch it unfold with you.
So I was talking to a conservative Jewish friend, and I was telling him I find this a fascinating story, and he responded, "It is on many different levels." I tried to point out to many of my anti-Trump friends that if the media and the Democrats in the White House lied about Biden's mental condition, how do we know that what they say about Donald Trump is true? Some of them deny that the press tried to cover up Biden's senility or did anything out of a desire to make sure they didn't help Trump. I don't think I changed any minds. But I do not know how reporters look at themselves in the mirror and think that they are honestly reporting the news.
Well, it is interesting that the media has sort of just tacitly admitted that they're basically pulling for Biden and that they hate Trump. And this is, in years past, there used to be at least the pretense of objectivity, and only the sort of opinion journals was where you'd find the political polemics. But now, CNN used to present itself as a sort of centrist, neutral media organization, and now it's clearly not so.
Okay, bro. Thanks for coming by. Take care, man.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, back to Megyn Kelly talking to John
Salary
Ellis.
president. 10 and 4, 10 and 4, right? 10 and 4, 6-hour president. Who says
must be accurate.
He's got to go. It was my math. 11 to 4 is 5. That's wrong. 10 to 4. Who says he now needs to not get any briefings or any taxing information past 8 p.m. because he's prioritizing sleep. I mean, tell it to Vladimir Putin. Like, we can only be attacked during 6 hours of the day and definitely not after 8 p.m. because that's when our president has to go night. And then your point about the black vote is very interesting. If you look at what the president has done post-debate, where did he go this weekend? Philadelphia. Who did he sit with? He gave 2 interviews to black radio hosts in predominantly black communities. He knows what you just said, that he's got to shore up the black vote to take on these so-called elites with whom he spent the past lifetime currying favor, these elites, these mega donors, the New York Times readers, the New York Times op-ed board, editorial board. But it's on now, and he's going back to the core base, and so far that base has not abandoned him. So far, this week may tell us more. John Ellis, what a pleasure. Great to see you. Please come back soon.
Thank you so much for having me.
And on
Okay, got another little video here. All right, this is Nick Gillespie, former editor-in-chief of Reason Magazine.
I was just going to say, a month ago in the New York Times, in an article, there was a headline saying Stephen Colbert finds the focus on Biden's age to be old news, and then it lists a bunch of late-night comedians making fun of the fixation on Donald Trump, on Joe Biden being ancient and old, and things like that. So all of this is of a piece. I think what is most interesting to me is not that the press is in the tank for Joe Biden and has been, and now they're going to start going overboard and saying, we caused all of this. We're the problem. We're the center. I mean, the media has main character syndrome more than, Elon Musk or Donald Trump does. It's been over a year where Donald Trump has been leading Joe Biden in the polls, according to Real Clear Politics. So it's the media finally catching up with the fact that Joe Biden is an unpopular president. Now they want to talk about why, and they want to talk about their starring role in why he is a terrible candidate who is going to lose, and they want him to win. So that, that kind of gets to your first question, Peter. The second one is, how do you rebuild it? It's by doing two things. It's by acknowledging the mistakes that you've made and why you've made them. And then it is actually doing things differently. And there is no reason to believe that. I mean, I know Olivia Nuzzi of New York Magazine. She's, an excellent reporter and all of that. But like when I read a reporter who follows Biden around all the time and starts to say, oh yeah, what, I was covering up, but I'm telling the truth now. That doesn't give me anything to work with. They need to start actually doing stuff differently. And I don't think the age thing is the biggest issue in this race. I think it's just becoming the whipping post for the press to explain why Biden is going to lose. And he was going to lose, according to the polls before the debate.
Catherine, Donald Trump was president for 4 years. During that time, we heard endless complaints about norm violations, about how what Donald Trump was doing was just totally out of bounds. It sure seems like what Biden is now doing, which is taking counsel from his crack addict grifter son Hunter, insisting on his fitness and capacity, despite obvious evidence to the contrary, is kind of a norm violation. So I guess my question here is just, but my norms? With a question mark at the end?
The way in which some of the high ground that Biden has is eroding in the face of this kind of old age scandal, I guess, is pretty notable. I think the uniting factor here is hubris. Both of these candidates are out here pretending, I think not even pretending, genuinely believing. I think it's sincere that they are the best or maybe even the only people who can do this job. And that's just obviously untrue in a way that if they had advisors who were not related to them, if they had advisors who were kind of outside of these tiny inner circles of trust that they both created, someone might have said that to them. And they might have been able to hear it. And unfortunately, I think the thing that Biden and Trump both have in common is this unfounded belief that they're the only ones. I mean, I think both parties are having the same thought right now, which is, oh my God, we would be winning this election by a landslide if we had just run a normal governor.
In Japan,
just you're done.
What's one move in bed that makes a man go crazy every time?
You gotta give him that Hawk Tuah and spit on that thing. You get me?
Hi, can I?
All right, that's the Hawk Tuah go.
Whole list. Just somebody who is boring and who puts the sentences together and who is the right age and has the right resume would be crushing either of these candidates. And that's not the path they chose because they chose to kind of go along with the delusion and hubris of these two kind of elderly kings of the parties.
Magazine editor wants candidate who can put sentences together.
Every day. That's all
news at 11.
We've really only had one out of the past 4 presidents who can do that.
Well, and that worked out pretty great for us. Obama was Reason Magazine's favorite president for sure, right?
Yeah. Now it's I like the broken English.
Let's bring
it's better than the alternative.
Let's bring Liz into this. The media has run with this story about Biden's decline over the past week or so. It is at the top of every major news website. Every major broadcast is leading with this. ABC did a whole special interview. They are not ignoring the story now, but many did for a long time. And my question to you, Liz, because I know you are a student of the media and you kind of understand how some of this works behind the scenes, why did it take so long?
Yeah, it's interesting that there's just been such a taboo about talking about it. I mean, I think, partly because voters in general are older, and also, the country runs on boomer power still. And I think that there's been, in general,
that's
there's
like
a taboo.
Desert power, but for old people.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think,
unfortunately, we
general,
don't have the batteries to store it. So
I think Elon Musk is working on that.
Yeah, it'll be too late.
I just think that there's been, this fear of alienating voters, older voters who are the core of the voting electorate if they talk too much about people being old. I think that's part of it, at least, a little bit of just worrying that, you're going to be accused of ageism, or that people were going to be like, well, wait, I'm that age. Are you saying I'm like that? So I think that there's some of that. And also just, but as Catherine said, the parties have just committed to these two people, and especially the Democrats have committed to Biden and going along with his delusions. And also, they've backed themselves into this corner where they don't want to run, Harris either. So on some level, unless Biden is just like out there being completely, decrepit and incompetent, he seemed like their best bet. And so there's just been this general feeling that, we can't talk about this because a lot of the media doesn't want to give the election to Trump again. They already feel like bad, like they gave the election to Trump back in 2016. I think there's still a lot of mainstream media who thinks their job is to, determine which way the election goes a little bit. And so, I know I've been sort of all over the place with my answer here, but I just think
it's multi-causal, right? There's not one reason here. I mean, I think the incentives were really aligned in a bunch of ways for journalists, for powerful White House press corps journalists in particular, or influential, right? Folks who are there close to the president. They want to preserve that access. And the Biden administration has been quite stingy with access generally. And they've been especially willing to be retributive, what's the word? To like exact revenge against the reporters they've been revenge seeking against the reporters who have reported on Biden's age. And so those folks who have been willing to come out and say, look, he's old, he's frail, he's in decline, they have lost access opportunities that they might otherwise have had. And that has created
other reporters have been really have been really angry at people who do point this out too. So I think that there's this, sense of people feeling worried about being shamed by other members of the media and, being told that they're the reason that Donald Trump's going to get elected because they're over focusing on these right-wing talking points about Biden's age and things like that. So yeah, it's just been, the media being too afraid to.
If I may, part of the puzzle here, though, is the voters themselves. And right after the debate, or starting the day after and for a few days after, the New York Times and Siena College or Siena University ran a poll, and they asked Democrats pre-debate, do you want Biden to be the candidate? Should he remain the nominee? And the answer was 52% wanted him to remain the nominee. After the debate, it went down to 48%. So it's not like a huge swing. Independents had something similar before the debate. 21% wanted a different candidate. After the debate, 22%. Republicans were asked about Trump. 80% wanted him before, 83% after the debate. So we're not necessarily like the voters. I don't think this. I think this is fundamentally a media story, and it's like it's that the people who cover Joe Biden want Joe Biden to win. There were reasons for that. They were not interested in a more progressive candidate. People in the Democratic Party wanted to go with Joe Biden because he had beaten Trump handily, at least in the popular vote the last time, and there didn't seem reason to change who would have been better and things like that. And I think now what we're seeing and what bothers me more is the massive cover your ass type stuff that the media is going to do. And somehow it's going to end up that people like us who are political independents or people who have always been critical, not just of Biden's age, but of his actual policies, somehow we're the problem, or the press is pretending that they determine who becomes president and who doesn't, period. And it's just, to me, we're in a moral panic. We're in a media moral panic about their role in their own, blindness.
Just my sample size of two of Midwestern swing voters, though, my parents who are like the quintessential swing voters, voted for Republicans, Independents, Democrats, no clear pattern whatsoever. They did come away from watching the debates the other night and both said to me independently, so who's the Libertarian candidate this year? Like they really actually were.
You have editorial boards and columnists and even some Democratic activists saying Biden should resign the presidency now and make way for President Kamala Harris.
I think the vice president would be a phenomenal president. I think she has the experience, the judgment, the leadership ability.
She is there and she is capable.
The campaign is underway to convince Americans that Kamala Harris has the experience and qualifications to be president, even though we all know Biden picked her as his running mate largely because she looked like the right kind of candidate. A woman of Black and Asian heritage, relatively young, the perfect foil to his old white maleness. What she was missing in substance, she made up for with a willingness to say things that young progressives like to hear.
Black lives have not been taken seriously as being fully human.
We have for generations now been defunding public schools, but yet militarizing police departments.
That's right. She went on to bungle interviews, flip-flop repeatedly, and fail to own any issue or commit to anything.
Talking about the significance of the passage of time, right? The significance of the passage of time. So when you think about it, there is great significance to the passage of time.
Biden had put Harris in charge of leading the administration's diplomatic efforts to address the root causes of migration from El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras, as the White House put it. It was a stopping the seas from rising kind of job, says Cato Institute immigration analyst David J. Beer, especially since Harris had no authority to actually change U.S. immigration policy. Still, a vice president could at least play a robust rhetorical role here, shifting the conversation around the issue or rallying Democrats behind an inspiring message. But rather than outline a coherent policy vision, Harris made a series of awkward decisions and comments that angered many Democrats and gave fodder to Republicans.
We've been to the border.
You haven't been to the border.
And I haven't been to Europe. And I don't.
Harris, whose mom was born in India and whose dad is from Jamaica, did eventually visit Guatemala, but then issued a disappointing statement for anyone hoping for a departure from Trump's immigration policies.
I want to be clear to folks in this region who are thinking about making that dangerous trek to the United States-Mexico border. Do not come. Do not come.
If Harris runs for president, she can't point to her record as a prosecutor because it's mostly become an embarrassment. As San Francisco district attorney, she increased prosecutions and convictions for misdemeanor quality of life crimes and pushed for giving fewer people access to the city's drug court, which offers alternatives to incarceration. She opposed the prostitution decriminalization measure, helped federal officials raid immigrant businesses, hid misconduct by a drug lab technician, and helped launch an anti-truancy initiative that would bring criminal charges against parents if their kids miss too much school. As California Attorney General, She fought against the court ruling that the state's death penalty was unconstitutional, fought to keep people in overcrowded prisons after a court ordered them released, defended the state's corrections department's denial of surgery for transgender inmates, and refused to back a measure requiring more scrutiny on police use of force cases. She also fought to shut down the sex worker-friendly ad platform Backpage while publicly ignoring sexual misconduct involving Oakland police and an underage girl. 1,974 people were sent to state prisons for possession of marijuana or hashish, while Harris was California's top cop.
Harris was supposed to be an inspiring figure, like Barack Obama, a relatable everyone.
All right, this is an analysis from the Libertarian Reason magazine.
Like Michelle Obama, or a folksy nerd like Biden as VP. Instead, she's shown all the charm and charisma of Hillary Clinton. This is the logical endpoint of Democrats' over-reliance on identity politics, an immensely unpopular candidate failing upwards to become the party's nominee. In some ways, Harris is the perfect avatar of the modern Democratic Party. She's
Okay, you're probably wondering, what does Dennis Prager have to say?
Was it your statement as the George Washington of our time? Did you see that? You didn't say that? Okay, so some writer put it. He would be considered to be the greatest, in some ways, the greatest president, foregoing his own ambition for the sake of the country. But he won't do it. I can't fully explain it because the only possible answer is he so loves being president. I believe he does. I truly do. His life has been as a politician who stands for nothing. He is in politics to be in politics. Most politicians are. The purpose of being in politics is to be in politics. It's a road to fame, sometimes fortune, certainly in his case, and his family's case. And he won't step down. Of course, they do have a dilemma, because if he steps down, the presumptive nominee, unless there is some intervention from the heavens or the hells, will be Kamala Harris. They're already starting, by the way, the geography of Kamala Harris. Have you seen that? What a terrific woman she is and how she has so grown in office. You can watch on YouTube. I debated Kamala Harris when she was running for Attorney General. I mean, it wasn't a full debate. It was a few minutes on the late Larry King show on CNN. And I didn't know who on earth Kamala Harris was. But I did leave thinking she wasn't particularly bright. I still believe that. But that doesn't matter, by the way. If you have good values and you don't have a particularly fine brain, you'll do pretty well in life.
Not necessarily. If you got a 90 IQ, all right, you're going to need a lot of help. So, Dennis, you're doing so well there. But then you had to go back to the nonsense.
You don't need a great brain to get ahead in life. You need clarity.
It's not true, right? The most successful at pretty much every profession outside of sports are the more intelligent.
Honesty and depth. That's what will get you ahead.
How much depth do you think someone with an 80 IQ can build?
And those are areas I believe she lacks. So they're in a bind. Neither candidate is particularly strong. They're going to have to mail out a lot of millions of ballots.
Oh, Dennis. All right. There's no evidence for massive voter fraud. That again, such a cheap shot.
Bingo card. The entire media turns on Joe Biden, knifes him repeatedly for 2 weeks or 2 months, completely batters and bruises him right before the vote. I mean, you couldn't. Did Trump ever? It was Trump who was supposed to be getting that treatment right now from the media. Trump was supposed to be in the media every day. Convicted felon. And instead we're getting decrepit, can't do it, incompetent, cognition, all the problems outlined by the Times and Politico and Axios and the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. I mean, everything.
Yeah, it's a black swan media event. It does not happen. And it only happens because Democrats are pushing it. I mean, a lot of opportunity to do that before, but now it's a problem for them. I think that the biggest issue when it comes to this campaign is at what point do you get to a point of no return with the center of the electorate, right? I mean, if you're looking, the reason that Joe Biden's like, all right, we're done talking about that, is that they're going to begin to incur, because of the daily conversation. I'm sure you've had this, Megan, people in your family who are not political at all, who you never hear from about anything in the news or they'll shoot you a text and be like, my Lord, look at Joe Biden. Like, it's become a global phenomenon in information flow. And undoing that with a certain segment of the electorate that he's going to require to win 270 electoral votes is no easy task. If I'm a Democrat, you wonder whether or not you're already at a point of no return with that.
Yeah. You'd want your party to be, or your press, to be hedging its bets a little bit more just in case he refuses to go, since he's got 99% of the delegates. This just in, guys, this is interesting. So we started the show by mentioning that the House Democrats are having a meeting and supposedly the House Senate members will, or the Democratic Senate members will as well. Just before, this is per Axios, House Democrats' Tuesday morning meeting, a smaller group of swing district Democrats held what sources described as a despondent gathering with actual tears. All right, these are the ones who are in these swing states where they'll lose if Joe Biden's too much of a pull. They're on the fence anyway. The block of battleground House Democrats is one of the last firm pockets of a rapidly disintegrating movement on Capitol Hill to get Biden off the ticket. One described the mood as, quote, pretty much unanimous that Biden, quote, has got to step down, adding, quote, there were actual tears from people and not for Biden. One House Democrat who was in both meetings, the smaller one with the swing state Dems and the larger one, said, quote, most of our caucus is still with him, meaning he'll stay in, which sucks for our country. So this thing is turning. It's starting to turn. I don't know what Joe Manchin is talking about when he says just wait for the weekend. I don't know what Mike Quigley is talking about when he says behind the scenes it's even worse. Trust me, they're going to come out, the ones who are behind the scenes saying get out, and they're going to say it in front of the cameras. He's already losing some donors, but not all. So how does this play out, you guys? Is there some big...
If you're talking about African Americans writ large and black women in particular, that is a core demographic to the Democratic Party, and there is no chance in hell that they can win states like Georgia, Michigan, Pennsylvania. You just can't do it. You can't even come close. If that constituency loses some enthusiasm in the 2024 election, they know that. So it's like a rock and a hard place. I mean, there's really, at this point, like the gurney might be a better option.
This is so interesting. Like, I actually don't know what's going to happen. I realize that Biden wants to stay and Jill Biden wants to stay, but I've never seen this kind of media onslaught by the left against one of their own candidates who's already basically been nominated. I mean, he's got 99% of the delegates. It's one thing when you can cut like a senator or a House member who's immersed in a massive scandal. That's one thing. They've done that. But this is something else entirely, and it's universal. I mean, and the hypocrisy, of course, is like so on the nose. The New York Times, what you say is, how did you put it, Smug? They're in a rage. They're impotent.
Impotent rage.
Impotent rage. Okay, I love that. They're in a meltdown right now, notwithstanding the fact that, you know, when did the Hur report come out? It was like a couple of months ago. HUR, the special counsel investigating Joe Biden and his misuse of classified documents. And this was their opportunity. He came out, he said, I would indict him. Yeah, he committed this crime, but he's a well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory, and I don't think that a jury would convict such a person. That's it. That's all he said. He did not go on about poor memory that, you know, is evident in all circumstances, or he can't put two sentences together, or he can't finish his thoughts, or he meanders, or he can't stay on topic, or all the things that we saw, or he's got the mouth agape and the dead waxy skin. Like none of that, none of that. And this is what we have a soundbite of people on TV, but trust me, we went back and looked at the New York Times. They were just as bad in what they said about Robert Hur at the time. Watch this and Stuff 5.
The comments that were made by that prosecutor, gratuitous, inaccurate, and inappropriate.
Hackery by Mr. Hur.
The guy knew. He's a Trumper. Who knew?
You are not to put a finger on the scale of politics.
That report showed that Merrick Garland again made the classic Democratic mistake, which is, I know, I'll appoint a Republican partisan to investigate, and that will give us credibility.
This one who was appointed by Donald Trump wanted to make sure that he got his licks in.
Okay.
You managed to infuse licks in and Jeffrey Toobin in a shot that you just played for the Ruthless Variety program.
It's subtle, but I knew you guys would get it.
I will point out for the listening audience, though, that CNN was good enough to pan to Toobin's hands, just so you know, just so you knew where they were.
A thoughtful gesture as a programming note.
Robert Hur, where do you go to get your reputation back, right? Smeared by everybody in the media, including the Times, which is now saying, he's got to step down, he's too infirm, he can't do it. They were disgusted about this one line in the guy's report. They had opportunities to report on it. They had excuses to report on it. It really wasn't until two things happened. The lawfare campaign failed. The polls, I guess three things, did not improve. And then the world saw in an undeniable way just how bad he was, that they were like, we got to get off this sinking ship right now. The devil's about to get elected.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, this episode perfectly illustrates the lengths to which Democrats went to try to conceal Joe Biden's actual health from the American public. I mean, Hur came out with this, they instantly criticized, and you knew that was coming. But then down the road, House Republicans tried to get the audio to put, they're still not able to get that out. The White House just had presidential privilege dropped on top of that, and so people couldn't listen to a deposition from the President of the United States with a special counsel. They couldn't hear it because the White House's extraordinary moves to try to conceal it. And like you said, I think like 4 months ago, if you had listened to that, my guess is, based on what was in that transcript, everybody would come to the same conclusion that we saw 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. But now Democrats are stuck in a hot war behind the scenes. And that's part of the reason why, Megan, you said that you can't figure out who's going to be their nominee. We can't figure out who's going to be their nominee. Democrats don't know who's going to be their nominee.
They had no plan.
They literally are in a war against each other. And the only chance that the New York Times and these members who want to get rid of Biden have, the only chance they have is if he has 99 delegates and Hillary Clinton isn't one.
Okay, here's some good clips of our friendly Uncle Joe Biden.
Surprise and another, lie of historic proportions. They've known the whole time. And with that said, well, Joe Biden in many ways, just had the best day since the debate. With the help of his usual teleprompter, the president delivered a whopping, pretty decent for him, 15-minute speech in front of NATO. Donald Trump's speech just went on nearly an hour and 20 minutes. What should be, by the way, a 15-minute speech, a layup for any U.S. president, especially with a teleprompter. Well, for President Biden, it was high drama all day long. All eyes on Biden. Article after article. The world is watching. Our allies are watching. And he managed to exceed what were very low expectations. And still, it wasn't a particularly strong performance. You decide.
To end Ukraine's democracy, to destroy Ukraine's culture, and to wipe Ukraine off the map. Even before Russian bombs were falling in Ukraine, the alliance acted. I ordered the U.S. reinforcements at NATO's eastern flank. The United States Germany, the Netherlands, Romania, and Italy will provide Ukraine with the equipment for 5 additional strategic air defense systems. And key, remember, fellas and ladies, it's supposed to fall in 5 days, remember? I'm pleased to award you the highest civilian honor the United States can bestow, the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Ask the military to come forward.
Despite little struggles, well, Biden appears to have done enough in his 15-minute speech, to pretty much stay in the race, maybe even silence some of the calls for him to step aside.
So when Joe Biden called into the Morning Joe show, he was reading from notes, right? And he gets lost, right? You can hear his paper shuffling. He loses his train of thought. He's unable to finish his sentences.
Nobody said anything except me and the folks out there in the local, race. He said, I did nothing to stop Russia's invasion of Ukraine. In fact, he said, I think I encouraged Russia from going, I think he encouraged Russia going in. I mean, I'm reading from a list of lies. First of all, he was made up quotes, suckers and losers.
Okay, so in 40 seconds, just reading off from papers, right? The president misspeaks or trails off 5 times in this 40-second clip. And the whole time, he's simply reading from prepared material. He can't even finish a sentence.
I was with he called the Americans in the cemeteries from World War I suckers and losers. And so this guy's going to have to start to answer for what he did. I'm not letting... Nobody said anything.
I want to give you more on the New York Times after Herr's report. Paul Krugman, opinion columnist. The disgusting furor over Biden's age. When the news broke about the special counsel's hit job, his snide, unwarranted, obviously politically motivated slurs about President Biden's memory, and he goes on from there. I had an hour-long off-the-record meeting with Biden in August, and I can assure you he is perfectly lucid with a good grasp of events. Flash forward to after the debate on June 28. Here's his headline. The best president of my adult life needs to withdraw. No apology to Robert Hur. It's just, okay, now I see the truth. I mean, I think, like, we could spend all day doing this. It's just so dishonest.
Okay, so congressional reporter Jake Sherman says every single Democrat I've talked to off the record has said Biden should step away.
Senate Democrat. No Senate Democrat has called on him to step off the ticket. It would take, 60, 70, 80% of them to get him off the ticket and to get Schumer and Jeffries to push him off. I think that's the reality of it. And I don't want to say they're weak leaders because they're not. They're not weak leaders, but they have not shown any interest in pushing him off the ticket. I talked to Hakeem Jeffries twice yesterday. He said, first, I am sticking with Biden. I have not wavered in that. And number 2, he said, my favorite phrase when I was a lawyer was asked and answered. So basically, he doesn't want to talk about this anymore. And I'm not, I think that there are let me put it this way, Joe. Every single Democrat that I've talked to off the record has said they think he should step away. Even some of those who are the most fervent Biden supporters publicly have said they don't think Biden could beat Trump. But it's difficult to push a
Right. So every single Democrat he talks to off the record wants Biden to step away, even some of Biden's most vociferous supporters in public. That'll do it for me.